Treating lepers, Saint Basil and the first hospital for the poor. The early Christians went out of their way to help the poor and the unfortunate, to an extent unheard of in pagan culture. For instance, we read that Saint Paul organized a large-scale collection of money for the poor Christians in Jerusalem. Not long after, Christians also began to help the sick. In the 3rd century, they even helped out victims of the plague, whom pagans understandably avoided for fear of contagion. And in the 4th century, Saint Basil professionalized the care of the sick by studying, teaching and defending Greek secular medicine. Saint Basil also built a huge professional hospital for the poor, the first in history. There he famously treated even lepers, who Basil considered, quote, no longer the objects of hatred, but instead of pity on account of their disease. So, we have a lot to get to. Let's start. Hey, good to see you. This is Stephan, author of In Search of the Sublime. On this World History channel, we'll trace humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific truth, moral excellence and enlightenment. We'll meet anyone from Mesopotamian astronomers and Indian yogis to Greek philosophers and Enlightenment scientists. And you'll meet them firsthand using primary sources, giving you valuable insights that transcend the surface-level understanding you get on other channels. Go check it out for yourself. Let's start. Let's start by studying Greek and Roman healthcare. First of all, the Greeks and the Romans had private physicians who used secular medicine as developed by Hippocrates and Galen. And these doctors explicitly distanced themselves from magic and faith healing. But these doctors were generally only available to the rich. We know of only a couple of doctors who occasionally helped the poor free of charge. The Greeks also had medical facilities known as Asclepions, which were, at least in theory, accessible to the poor. Yet these facilities were more like healing temples than hospitals. Patients slept in these temples hoping that the god Asclepius would visit them in their dreams and provide a cure. But the doctors in these Asclepions did also recommend dietary changes and even performed some types of surgery. And therefore a case can be made to see these places as proto-hospitals. Yet most treatments had more in common with faith healing. Now let's turn to the Romans. The Romans had hospitals for specific groups, such as wounded gladiators or soldiers. These hospitals often had professional doctors and even specialists, but they were not accessible to the general public, let alone to the poor. Christianity greatly expanded the care of the sick. According to Dionysius from the 3rd century AD, the bishop of Alexandria, Christians even helped out victims of the plague, whom pagans understandably avoided for fear of contagion. We read, they visited the sick without a thought as to the danger, assiduously ministering to them, tending them in Christ. And so most gladly departed this life along with them. And many, when they had cared for and restored to health others, died themselves, thus transferring their death to themselves. The first Christian proto-hospitals started in monasteries. The earliest known reference comes from Saint Pachomius in 324 AD, who, quote, appointed a house of stewards to give comfort to all the sick brothers with attentive care according to their rules. Yet this treatment was only accessible to other monks. And on top of this, the treatment was also mostly non-medical. These monasteries often recognized various types of demonic afflictions, and in some cases they claimed illness was just a test from God, which therefore did not require medical treatment, but only prayer and faith in God. Yet a number of these monastery hospitals did offer diets, pharmaceuticals, and sometimes even surgery. So in this sense, they can count as proto-hospitals, just like the Asclepions of the Greeks. This practice changed with Saint Basil in the 4th century, who studied and taught Greek secular medicine and also defended its use. In the 60s of the 4th century, for instance, he defended the use of pharmaceuticals in the following way. We read, just as each of the arts has been given to us by God as a help to supplement the deficiencies of nature, For instance, agriculture, because what grows out of the earth of itself is not sufficient to relieve our necessities. Or weaving, because the need of covering is paramount in view both of decency and the damage inflicted by the weather. So it is with the medical art. Since our body, so subject to disease, is liable to various kinds of harm, the medical art has been given to us by God. Saint Basil also built the first hospital for the general public, which came to be known as the Basileias, named after Saint Basil. And it was located in central Turkey, although we do not have the precise location. And of course, the doctors at this hospital were all trained in secular Greek medicine. Basil's friend Gregory wrote about this: "Go forth a little way from the city, and behold the new storehouse of piety, where disease is regarded philosophically, that is scientifically, and disaster is put to the test." Basil called his own hospital a place for the care of the poor, or a togotrophion, and sometimes also a place to care for orphans and even lepers. And the complex included an orphanage, a lepersarium, a house for the poor, a hostel for travelers and the homeless, storehouses, workshops, housing for staff, a monastery, a church, and more. Understandably, the complex got the nickname a new city. The leprosarium deserves some extra attention, as lepers were often considered to be the most wretched on the earth. As lepers were a huge economic burden, and because of the risk of contagion, they were often shunned by society and displaced to the outskirts of the city, where they often lived lives not unlike animals. But at the hands of Basil, we read, they were, quote, no longer the objects of hatred, but instead of pity on account of their disease. And Basil also worked in the leprosarium himself as an example to others. Basil also cared about the orphans. About them he wrote, "We are of the opinion that every age, even the very earliest, is suitable for their admission. And thus such children, as have lost their parents, we adopt of our own free will, being desirous, after the example of Job, to become fathers to the orphans." And this too was very different from the treatment of orphans by the pagan Romans and Greeks. Here it was relatively common to find abandoned baby girls or handicapped kids or otherwise unwanted babies, who were just crying along the road or in garbage dumps or drainage ditches, or they were placed in front of temples. And sometimes slave traders would then take these children away. And also a child was only recognized as a member of the family after the father had lifted up the baby after a few days. And before that time, infanticide was not considered a crime. People had a window of a few days to get rid of their babies. The Basileias became a huge success. His friend Gregory wrote in Basil's funeral oration that his hospital easily surpassed the wonders of the world. We read, "Go forth a little way from the city of Caesarea, and behold the new city, that is the Basileias." Why should I compare the Basileias with Thebes of the seven portals, and the walls of Babylon, and the pyramids, and the bronze of the Colossus, all wonders of the world, from which their founders gained no advantage except from a slight meed of fame? My subject is the most wonderful of all, the short road to salvation, the easiest ascent to heaven. And within a few decades after St. Basil's achievement, hospitals were widespread in the Eastern Roman Empire. And some of these hospitals even treated non-Christians. Another great early hospital was the Hôtel Dieu in Paris, which is situated next to the Notre Dame. According to tradition, it was founded in 651 AD, yet its first recorded mention that we have today dates back to 829 AD, so in both cases very old. In fact, it is the oldest hospital still in operation today, although the actual building was rebuilt a couple of times. And one final thing we have to mention. Although less well documented, India also saw the development of hospitals for the general public, also in the 4th century AD. And this was first recorded by Fa Chiang, a Chinese Buddhist monk who traveled across India around 400 AD and documented his findings. in his book Records of the Buddhist Kingdoms. A very interesting manuscript. In here we read, the heads of the Vaishya families, that is the middle class, established in the city houses for dispensing charity and medicines. All the poor and destitute in the country, orphans, widowers and childless men, maimed people and crippled, and all who are diseased, go to these houses and are provided with every kind of help, and doctors examine their diseases. And thus we conclude the remarkable story of the development of the first hospitals for the poor. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to know more about Christian history or any other topic from world history, read my book In Search of the Sublime. You can read it for free on worldhistorybook.com, or you can buy a physical copy on Amazon. See you next time. Bye bye.